Well, I've said it before, I'll say it again. New day, new issues. To start with, winter has finally come to Wisconsin. So this is what we get for having a decent June. It all showed it at once. All in all, not too bad. But when half my parts are over there and the truck is over here, that does lead into some issues. But getting back onto the truck, so we left off with the bars and the main support being installed and looking at the shocks themselves. Where I'm having an issue is with hardware. There have been a few things that have been updated as far as parts in the kit, but the instructions are not showing. So I've got these adapters which are listed for the rear shock mount, which I'm not seeing anywhere that they go. None of the hardware that they sent me is correct, at least for what I have. Like this main bar here is the upper shock mount. Well, in the instructions, that part isn't solid. It's got a notch, if you can see here, that takes a bolt in the upper and the lower. And then it's also only supposed to have, see the different sheet here? It's only supposed to have the extensions on one side for the upper shock mount. So when I'm looking at this, we've got the extensions on both sides and we're solid. So the hardware they sent me was to have a bolt top, bolt bottom. That doesn't work. These bolts are long enough, but they're a little bit thick. And again, I'm running an issue with alignment on the lower part of the frame. These bolts fit okay. They are a little bit long, and they're not quite thick enough to hold the shock tight. So I am going to have to go through and find some new hardware. I do have a call into the company to see what's going on. Maybe I got the wrong hardware bag or something. I'm not sure. But again, I'm at a point where I can keep going with my mock-up. I'll throw a nut on those, I'll throw a nut on those so stuff doesn't fall, and I can start mocking up the differential. So again, the one that we dropped out of the vehicle, the rear differential, is a Dana 44. And depending on the generation, they said most of them are 8.5. They could vary a little bit depending on what the application, what the generation is. Dana is typically put in Chryslers, so like Jeeps, Durangos, Dodge pickups, things like that. They did put them in other stuff, obviously, with the Ford, but mostly they were Chrysler. Stepping up into this guy here, this is a Ford 8.8 inch out of a 2000 Ford Explorer. Some other common Ford sizes are going to be a 7.5. They came in like some of the mini trucks and some of the lighter Mustangs. And then the 9 inch is one that everybody knows and is sought after. So there's a lot of terms to throw around when we're talking about this. You got rear end, differential, ring and pinion, pig gear, limited slip, full locker, open differential, track lock. There's a bunch of different terms being thrown around what we're talking about. I'm going to give you a brief, simplistic overview. There's a whole lot more to go into. If anybody has any questions, want to drop them in the comments below. I can have an episode dedicated just to that. But for right now, we're going to go through and keep it as simple as we can. We'll see if in the meantime I can come up with some animations to make this work. You guys have already witnessed my drawing ability, which is not awesome. But basically, for your atypical hot rod type vehicle, you got your engine in the front, transmission in the middle, you got your drive shaft, and you've got the rear differential. So you've got the engine in the front, is spinning this way, which is going in and spinning the transmission, which is carrying down the drive shaft, which is turning into your rear differential. So how does this motion turn into this motion at the wheel? That happens with the differential. So this guy is called the pinion, and this guy is called the ring gear. So you get the term ring and pinion. Some of the old timers will call it a pig gear. So this part here is connected to a yoke. This comes through the front of the differential. As you know, as it's sitting in the vehicle, this comes out and a yoke bolts to here, which connects to the drive shaft. So the drive shaft is spinning, which spins this gear. This is sitting, we're going to have to go a little cattywampus because of what I've got in one hand. So if this is coming through, then this gear rides along that one. Let's see, where am I at? Yeah, I don't have my line up quite right, but this comes in and it spins this gear. So the relationship between this gear and this gear gives you your gear ratio. So this one is one I had bought. It is a Ford 8.8 373. So let's see if I get this correct. For every one rotation of the tire, the drive shaft is spinning 3.73 times. And that's going to change a little bit depending on, you know, what size tires and all that. So it should be like one full revolution of the axle, let's say. This diameter is what gives your differential its size. So this one is an 8.8. Fords have, you know, their big racing one is a 9-inch. You know, it's one of the strongest aftermarket aftermarket. We're going to delete all that. We're going to rewind it. So Ford's most popular one is the 9-inch, and that's going to be probably the most popular and one of the strongest factory differentials put out there. They've got all different types of gear ranges as well. The other thing that makes that nice is for this guy to change your gearing, you have to pull up the drive shaft, pull off the yoke, pull out the axles, pull everything apart. Sometimes you can just replace this, but generally these are, you know, they need to be replaced as a set. So you pull everything apart, you set that in, and then you rebuild everything. When you have, like the Ford 9-inch, it has a front load to it, which unfortunately I don't have a version of that here, but that works a little bit different. All right, back in the other shop, the one with the heater. So as this differential sits, right now it's nose down, but as this differential sits in the vehicle, let's get it rotated up. You pull off the rear cover and that gear set is inside. The big notch here is for the ring gear, and then the pinion gear is attached to the flange up front. So with a Ford 9-inch, instead of this thing coming off, you take off a bunch of bolts around the housing and then kind of back up a little bit. The axle, when it comes through and attaches, has something called a C-clip. So you pull this panel or this thing off, and then you take out a bar, and you'll see, because I'm going to go through all this and clean it up. So I'll have a little more of this later on. But there's a bar that you pop out. When you pop that out, that allows the axles to push in. When those push in, there's a C-clip that goes into the end, and that's what holds the axle in place. A lot of folks don't like those, because if that C-clip breaks for whatever reason, your whole axle flies out of the differential. So a 9-inch actually has a housing that bolts to the end that keeps everything in. So if you're going to change a gear set in a 9-inch, they call it the third member, you undo take the wheels off, undo the plates, you can pull the axles out just a little bit, take the 10, 12 bolts out of it, and this whole front piece comes out. Where that's a benefit, especially in the racing, is you can have 2 or 3 of those third members for, okay, I want to drive the vehicle there, so I'm going to have a higher gear ratio for highway driving, get to the track, take that out, put in a lower gear ratio for racing. Okay, I'm getting ready to leave, swap it back out again. So it's easier to do that if you want to, if you're set up that way. The other big discussion to have when you're choosing which one for your project is cost, maintenance, and necessity. These days, and this is a big argument in the Ford circles and in the aftermarket in general, for what most people are doing, this is going to be a straight-driven rig, might get hammered on once in a while, but not too bad. There is absolutely no reason to go through the extra cost of putting a 9-inch in here. The only thing it gives you is street cred. He's not doing quarter-mile launches. He's not doing wheel stands, anything like that. It's mostly a highway cruise-around vehicle that can hammer on once in a while. An 8.8 for a street vehicle is virtually as strong as a 9-inch. So they've got 10-second Mustangs running 460s with an 8.8, and they hold up just fine. This entire axle, which has a limited slip differential, and again, we can get into that another time, and the 373 gear ratio, which is a good overall acceleration versus highway cruise gear ratio, I got this entire thing for $150. So I'm going to go through, clean it up. I'm going to paint it just like I did the frame. I'm going to, go through all the gears, replace everything, pop this little half shock off because I don't need that. And then I've got a set of brakes for it that will match what's on the front. The brake kit was another $350. So for, let's call it $600 in time, you have an 8.8. This one does not need to be modified. It'll go in just as it is. Some of them you do have to change your axle shaft, and again, that's depending on the project. This one, is virtually a bolt-in unit for what I'm trying to do. And like I said, $600, limited slip, disc brakes. It's got, factory disc brakes on it. 373 gear ratio, and you can service and maintain it. I mean, they've got thousands of these types of axles. So for this project, this is more than enough than what we need. It keeps the 5x4.5 bolt pattern that I need for the wheels that we're putting on it. Matches the front with the kit that we got there. The factory one was a 5-on-5, if I remember correctly, so that wasn't going to work anyway. I would have had to, change the gear ratio in there for what we're putting in it. I would have had to change the axles to meet. I would have to upgrade it to disc brake. By the time you get in all that, I'm at the cost of this thing anyway. So, again, this is a big argument. People might have disagreements with it, but end of the day, choose what's right for your project. Choose what you want for yours. I'm not going to do something just for street cred. It doesn't make sense to me. It's like having a 1,000 horsepower street car. I got 1,000 horsepower. How much did you pay for that 200 horsepower that you're actually using? Now, if you're taking it to the track and you're hammering on it, you're beating on it, if you want a wheel stand, if you're doing mud bogging, something like that, where you have the need for that extra strength, by all means, get a 9-inch. They're awesome rear ends. You can have it specifically built to whatever you need. But for a street vehicle, absolutely zero need for that. All right, with a little bit of help from an unnamed assistant, I've got the axle roughly located. And then we see what our next series of obstacles are. So first one, take a look at the diameter of the axle tube versus the notch. So this particular kit is made for a 9-inch, which has a 3-inch axle tube. The 8.8 has a 3.5-inch. So I'm going to have to notch that a little bit more to get it to sit in there. Also, I've got a little bracket here that didn't get cut off. That'll take about 30 seconds with the cutoff wheel. That'll be gone. And then the other issue that I'm looking at, which is kind of unique if I'm looking at this right, that is one of the mounting points. I'm going to assume that that might be for the sway bar, actually. So those will have to come off. And then looking here is going to be where this sat the leaf spring perch. So which means that this sat a little bit more like that there. So one thing, again with the mock-up, is we need to have the engine in place before I can finish the mock-up of this differential, because you run into issues with what the driveline angle is coming from the engine and transmission to the pinion line angle, and you want those to be equal and opposite. So if you have a 3-degree drop coming out of your transmission, then you want a 3-degree rise out of your differential. And basically what you're trying to do is when you take off, you're going to have forward momentum, and you don't want to put your U-joints in an extreme angle. So there's a formula, there's a calculation to it. With the instruction kit, it does give you kind of a rough idea. You want the two lines to be parallel, and then you can do your fine-tune adjusting. Say if you lengthen or shorten the lower bar on each side, that is going to affect the tilt of the differential. So my next step for sure is me cutting off those 4 mounts that I'm not going to need, cutting off that bracket, and kind of getting everything cleaned up before I start painting and cleaning and all that. The other thing is going to be when I have the drive shaft built, do I want to keep the flange on, or do I want to go with more traditional yoke? And that's a decision down the road. I don't need to make that one now. So a couple bolts there, that whole piece should come off. That's for a speed sensor on a newer vehicle. Obviously, we're not going to use that. There is a vent for the built-up gases. I'll make sure it's cleaned up and make sure I've got good routing for that. And then obviously, as we're taking a look, the shock hits when I've actually got it pushed all the way and it hits that mount. So to make sure we've got the clearance and all that. So still got some work to do. But every step is one step closer. We're starting to look like a rolling vehicle again. And this gives just a little better idea. I still have to knock out the spring perches. I still have to re-arch the bracket here. Same as over here. But we can see the clearance that we're supposed to have in between the axle and the shock. I do have to grind those down a little bit more. I'm starting to get a better idea how all this is going to lay out. And the engine mounts will go into the cradle here. Transmission mount will most likely take the place of this. Transmission will probably end, let's say right about here. And then we'll have a shot for the drive shaft. That'll have to be custom made. So yeah, a little bit more. Front end is almost finished. A few more pieces. I don't have the shocks in there yet. A couple more things I want to finish while I'm up in there. Rear end is almost done. A little bit of hardware, just a little bit more cutting. And it'll be having to, again, redraw that radius so that sits flush against the axle. And then I can get it cinched pretty close. And then once we get the engine in, like I said, we can final set that pinion angle and actually do a hard weld in the meantime. Make sure we've got the adjusters where they're accessible. You still have to crawl underneath the vehicle, but they're accessible. If I would have turned around the other way, then the adjuster will be up in the frame and that wouldn't work. So again, just kind of paying attention to little details. So next, like I said, a little bit more cutting and a little bit of hardware, and I should have the rear pretty close to wrapped up. And while I'm thinking about it, the panhard bar, again, it's got a piece that's going to get welded to the axle. Again, I'll have to recurve that wherever it is I decide to put it. Maybe we'll flip it around to this side because that other side has the vent. I'm sorry, I know the camera's getting flipped around. So basically there'll be a bracket that'll weld onto here, that bracket that will weld onto there, and then this will have an adjustment to it to be able to locate that rear end side to side. I'll probably have to put a boxing plate in there to weld that bracket too. But I should have everything I need to, other than a little bit of hardware, to finish this up. Oh, Mother Nature has a sense of humor. I don't know what's better, the like 8 inches of snow or the 1 for a high temp today, but whew, getting some work done. But I've got the rest of my mock-up pretty close to be done. A few things to take care of, but I did get my surprise up, a little bit of jewelry for the truck. I apologize getting everything crammed in here for space. I'm a little bit limited trying to get everything inside before the snow came. But I've got some American Racing 18-inch torque thrust with some BFG CompTA tires. So if I remember right, the rears are 18 by 10 and the fronts are 18 by 8. I could have that wrong though. So I'll get a little better shot with it being angled. So good set of shoes on this thing, has it looking a little closer to a hot rod. So my next step is to get the garage cleaned up, get all this cleared out. I will get the cab back on the frame so I can do some lining up with the engine and the steering. Again, the rear end, I need to dress that frame, or the rear end, put the disc brake kit on that I have that'll match the fronts, and get some new hardware and a little bit of trimming. but I should have the rear differential close to installed here shortly as well. But again, I want to get the cab on, one, just free up a whole bunch of room in here. And again, once I can get that locked out, this is where the cab is, then I can make sure I center that the engine right where I want it. So the next step should be mocking up the engine and transmission. Once that's done, you get the rear end pinion set. Once that's done, then I can get it measured out for the drive shaft. And then we get to the fun part. This is all the easy stuff. All right, so it's been some time later. I've gotten a few things done, but I'm still working on getting this rear end cleared up. So I will show you where I'm at now. So again, we're going with a Ford 8.8 differential. This one is out of a 2000 Ford Explorer. It does have the factory disc brakes. And by the tag, this one is a limited slip differential, and it should be the 373 gears. I got to clean up the tag a little bit and get a little more specifics, but I'm pretty sure that's what I've got here. I did have to cut off the spring perch is what that one is, and then the remainder of the shock mount. So that's what I'm working on here. A couple pieces of equipment that I'm working with. We have got a cutoff wheel. We have got a grinding disc. And then we have got a flat disc. So all three things do something different. All three are going to help with what I've got. And then for personal protective gear, we've got the shatter resistant glasses, we've got the face shield, we've got the hearing protection. I do have long sleeves to help with some of the sparks and whatnot, but we're going to get this cut down, and then a few other things that I need to work on. So again, this is the bracket that connects the floor link to the rear end. This part connects to the frame, to the bracket we've already got on there, and this here's the part that connects to the rear end. So depending on where this thing needs to sit, these guys are in the way, so I had to let that go. Pardon the camera. And then if I bring the bracket up, the bracket doesn't quite fit, so I'm gonna have to notch that out a little bit. So the bracket is made for a 9-inch rear end. This one's an 8.8. They got a little bit different tube sizes. They're pretty close. It won't take much, but just enough to clearance. And then I figure out what my center to center is. So based off where the center of the differential is, I know what my distance between the two brackets is, so I know where to burn them in. But I'm cleaning this up. I've got to find some new dust covers, and I've already got the brakes, and then I've got some seals that I need to change. So I know I've been real back and forth on the videos. I'm trying to get, what I can with the filming that I've got, but we are still under progress. All right, so after a little bit of working, I've still got to clean up the rest of it, but I was able to knock these mounts down where I needed them to. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the rest of this cleaned up. I need to pop this cover off, drain everything, clean everything up as well. So I had a little bit of leakage out of the vent. And then I gotta do the rear seal, and I gotta do the front pinion has signs of seeping as well, so get those taken care of. Get the diff cleaned up a little bit, get one small coat of chassis coat on there, and then I'll be able to burn through that when I do the rest of them, and then I can, when I do the other mounts, and then I can lay a heavier second coat on afterwards. But I want to get this stripped up and at least get a coat of protection on it. So that's where we're at for now. Alright, so I got most of the big stuff taken off now. Double check your product. Not everything needs to be down to shiny metal, and there's actually some of them that prefer not to be shiny metal. So this one is a kind of paint over rust situation. You don't want it to be clean. So it's not a paint, it's a coating. And I'm sure chemically there's a difference in there. So again, the stuff that I'm using is Eastwood Rust Encapsulator Plus. It's their second formula. And this one says, I've got a little bit of drip on the back of the can, so I may not be able to read it completely. But it says Eastwood Rust Encapsulator Plus is a high performance something that encapsulates and stops rust from spreading. Rust Encapsulator Plus does not need to be top coated except when exposed to direct sunlight. Rust Encapsulator Plus can be top coated with any paint. It can be used over bare metal surface or surface rusted areas. Roll, brush, or spray with conventional spray equipment. Is for any of rusted metal surface and can withstand temperatures up to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So again, this one is an either or, so a little bit of correction there. Again, you want to get all the loose flaky stuff off. That's what I just did. I've got some residue from, some grease, and I've got some where it was leaking out of the vent. So I'm going to take my degreaser, coat it up, take a wire, just a hand wire brush to it, knock all that, rinse it off, let it dry. And then I will, first coat, I'm just going to do a brush coat on. And then again, when I do it for real, when I knock everything back apart, I will coat it with spray equipment. Okay, so here we are. Got it all cleaned up. Just going to let it sit and dry. A couple of notes to make on this one. I didn't spend too much time on the cover because I'm going to be doing a girded aluminum cover over it. We'll get into that when I get that far. This one from the Explorer does have a speed sensor in there. There's a lot of jokes that get made about these things, have these swaps to have a old vehicle like that, have something like that. I'm kind of up in the air as far as what fuel injection unit I'm going to use. I'm kind of leaning towards Holley at this point, and depending on what version you get, Holley does have the ability, if you want to get that far, and using the modern equipment, the speed sensors and all that. I'm not going to set it up to start with, but the option will be there if the customer decides to go that far in the future. Again, I've got some more cleanup and stuff to do for right now. This isn't going to be a final coating. This is just going to be a once over, kind of see how everything looks once I get the paint on it, see if there's any issues to address afterwards. And again, a light coating I will be able to burn through with the welder when I get those rear brackets finished. Too heavy of one, and I'm going to want to grind it back down again, so I'm not going to go that heavy with it. But new rear end cover, new pinion seal. I'm going to talk to my drive shaft guy and see if it's all right to use that companion flange, or if I should rip that off and put a standard yoke on it. Again, the backing plates are going to go. Those brackets should stay, so I'll see what I do with those. And again, I've got all new brakes, obviously. So wait for this guy to dry. We got a pretty decent sunny day, and then get some color on it. So the first coat, mostly dry. Again, I've got a new cover on order. I did touch up a couple of different spots that weren't awesome, but once it gets dry, it'll look pretty solid. It'll dry the same kind of satin sheen as what the frame is. Once it's dry, I'll get it worked around, set back between the frame rails. Got the front mounts. Obviously, I'm gonna actually weld those in as well as have the bolts. Still trying to figure out this rear cross member, but I should be able to get a bit closer on that rear end once it dries. In the meantime, I've still been working on the body a little bit, so I've got some sanding done. I have an idea for the seat. This isn't going to be the seat that I'm using. I do need to finish disassembling the interior, and hopefully by the end of the week I have at least the cabin primer. I have found a new bed. It should be a brand new one, and the cost of replacing it is going to be cheaper than the cost of bringing this one back. So I'll keep this one, just for rat rod style, but I will be getting a brand new bed. All right, so I'm at kind of a holding point on the rear end. I'm waiting for my welder to show up, so hopefully in a couple days I'll have that at least tacked into place if it's not welded completely. I'll give you the update where I'm at the moment. All right, so I did get some new hardware, and I've got some of that locked down. I've been talking with the manufacturer, and I think what I'm going to have to do is just hog those holes out. They said that it won't lose any structural integrity, being the fact that that's a big holding part of the entire rear end of the truck. I just want to make sure it's not going to lose any strength if I open that up to the 5/8. They said they're not really sure what happened, but it's supposedly the right part that got sent. For whatever reason, it just wasn't drilled out to spec, is what they're telling me. So I've got those. I've got the cradles in the rough position. I still need to notch them out a little bit, but they're in a rough position where they should be. And then I need to get a plumb bob so I can center the axle over that to make sure I'm where I need to be. But in the meantime, I do have the truck sitting about at ride height. Let me see if I can back out a little bit. So wheels are on the ground. I've got it kind of braced at least enough for right now that the cab is level. So I'll check with the customer and see if they want any kind of rake to it, if they want it to be flat level, if they're okay with the overall height, they want me to cut a coil to drop the front end, and I'll drop the rear end. Once I have all that set up, then I'll be able to spot in that pinion angle. But this is where she's sitting right now. I have the engine fairly close to roughed in. I've got a little bit more adjustments to make so I can make some motor mounts for it. Again, it's a 351 Windsor from a 1969 Mustang. I did end up having to change the transmission that I'm going with. I had some fitment issues. This one is a 4R70W from a 3.8 Mustang. It does have the same bolt pattern, the bell housing pattern, as a small block Ford. And the generation that this came out of, which would be anything from like 96 to 04, I'm not sure after that. The 4.6 engine does not have the same bolt pattern as the small block Ford, the 5 liter and the 351. But the 3.8 does. They do share one. So this transmission I'm using out of that, it is a little bit more of a sporty transmission, you know, with the gear set and whatnot than what a standard AOD is. But that'll bolt up nice and work. So I need to finish lining up where the engine is so I can officially burn that in the rest of the way. I've got to square up the cab. I'm a little bit off on my cab mounts. I did get new cab mounts in the mail the other day, so I can rough that in. Once the cab is square and centered, then I can square up. This is just a mock bed. I do have another one ordered. I just have to go get it. Once I square up the cab, then I can square up the bed, and then I can make sure the fenders and all that align up the way that I want to. Still working on getting the doors set. Again, this is not the seat that I'm going to use, but I may have found one. I'm working on getting the dash ready to go. We're going to reuse the factory gauge cluster. We're going to update a few things. One of the big things, we're going to make everything 12 volt. So I know I'm not the best at keeping track of where I am and what I'm doing, but at the moment, all 4 wheels are on the ground, and this is going to be a rough idea as how it's going to sit. Now, for how much lower this is sitting than what factory was, I want to show you something. So I'm 5'10 and a half, 5'10 and 3/4, depending on how bad my knees have compressed throughout the day. So I'm not tall, I'm not short, I'm kind of right in the average as far as everything. But this particular truck, if you think about the height of today's average vehicles, this thing is sitting right about the 6 foot level. I am okay with that if that was mine. I might go so much as to chop maybe 2 inches out of the top, because it does kind of bubble up when you get inside. But when you compare it to a car, obviously it's a lot taller than a car. If you compare it to a standard newer truck, it's about the same, if not maybe a little bit lower. I know the angle is hard to see, but see here, if I come, I don't really have a straight edge. So it's sitting about the 6 foot mark for height. So again, from where I've gotten to where I am, it doesn't seem like I've gotten very far, but a lot of the structure is getting taken care of. And then once the structure is done, the rest of it goes pretty easy. So I do have the new brake master cylinder that's going to mount up here. I do have the new steering column that's going to come in that will tie into the rack and pinion. It's going to be full power. Again, it is going to have air conditioning. It's going to have fuel injection, you know, all the goodies on it. It'll be good when it's done. So a lot further to go on it, but making progress every day. And I think that's a good stopping point for this episode. So again, you can see some of the pitfalls that come into building a vehicle from scratch, especially when you're going custom. Schedules and delays and parts and you name it will always play a factor in getting this stuff done. But starting to get close to getting onto the body work, which is kind of interesting. That was another one that took a while because I thought I was pretty close to having it ready for paint. And then when I took it there, they said, no, it was still in pretty rough shape. So that blew the budget and the time frame as well. So a lot of these are things that'll get glossed over, or they'll get highlighted for drama's sake on some of your other TV shows or whatnot. This is just the reality of building a custom vehicle. The customer that I have has been extremely patient with all this stuff, understandably, again, with how late we are. But again, it's one of those, you have great visions and great ideas when you start, but then the unforeseen kicks up, and this offsets this and offsets this, and I can't do this until this is done, and I'm waiting on parts for this, and things when you're setting your initial timeline and things that had to be custom made. It's like, yeah, I can have that to you in 3 weeks, and then a month later you put the order and it says, oh, I had a rush and now I'm 3 months behind. Well, I can't do this until this is done, so kind of on a waiting pattern. So again, anybody that's ever built one of these, I'm not saying anything you've never heard. Anybody who's never done something like this, you have to take that into consideration. And having done projects like these, not to this extent, but having done projects like these for myself, timelines didn't really bother me. I had other stuff going on, and I wasn't sitting there chomping at the bit. You have a customer that's giving you money, yeah, that timeline becomes infinitely more important. So again, wrapping up this one, you guys know my end drill. Like, subscribe, comment. I'll answer what I can. In the meantime, be safe. I'll see you next time.